Being an IT guy, I kind of got a little bit more interested and went down the rabbit hole of comms. Um, and so the first thing that I wanted to do is be able to extend my range. That meant I had to learn some things about antennas, power, and then some of the more advanced radio capabilities, from the Baofeng to high frequency radio and longer range communications. What one of my lessons learned is I wasn't really clear in the beginning of what I wanted my capabilities to be. So that's one of the things that I recommend everybody think about. Is it just being able to talk around a piece of property, around your subdivision? Do you want to be able to talk regionally, or do you want to be able to talk, across the United States? So the technology gets much more sophisticated the further out you go. So what I'm going to attempt to do is give you an idea as to what some of the capabilities are with these little Baofengs, how you can extend those, go into some security stuff, and then talk about some of the additional technologies out there that are going to be beneficial from a security perspective. If at any point anyone has any questions, please let me know. First thing I want to do though is get a feel for the group. Does everyone here have one of the Baofeng radios, or is it FRMS, GMRS radios? Okay, so no, yes, not yet. Baofeng, Yaesu, Baofeng, no radio? Okay. All right, so if you go into a sporting goods store, you can get the FRS, GMRS radios. They're referred to online as the bubble pack radios. They're probably one of the more common radios that's going to be found out there in the community. They're used a lot by people on little formats. They're used a lot by guys going out in the woods and hunting. I know at our hunting camp, when we first started using radios, they were the little FRS radios. And what we figured out very quickly is that they're underpowered. They have a maximum wattage of 2 watts at best. Some of the frequencies for FRS and GMRS are related even below that at half a watt. So what that means is that if you get into a piece of ground like this and you've got trees, if you're in a suburban area and there's lots of buildings, your ability to transmit and have that go very far is limited. So they'll advertise 20 miles on these radios. And if you took them out to the desert and you put one guy on a mountain and another guy on a mountain, and they were 20 miles apart, and you keyed it up, you could probably get a contact. And that's more than likely where they've established that from. Reality is that put one person here and one person there, there's going to be trees, there's going to be hills, there's going to be buildings, there's all of the stuff that's going to absorb that radio frequency and limit your range. So my little Baofeng here in my area, what I figured out was that with the antenna that's delivered, I can probably get 1 mile, 2 miles, and that just really wasn't acceptable. I wanted to extend my range. So one of the things that you can do is you can get additional antennas, and I'll back up. You can have a $500 radio, and if you put a $100 antenna on that radio, you have a $100 radio. The antenna is really what determines how efficient you're able, how much radio energy can be absorbed. So one of the things that's popular to do to these radios to enhance them is to get an additional antenna. I can send that information out if anybody's interested. I'm going to leave a notepad here. Anyone that's interested in getting communications up, put down your name, your email address, and where you're located. Because what I'm going to do is work with you to identify repeaters in your area. So these radios have limited amount of range, but the hams in a geographic area have repeaters set up that will help you extend that. Usually what they do is they have them a radio antenna or radio repeater set up on a mountain, And because it's at a higher elevation, it's able to pick up a radio signal from a much further distance. So that in general, in the ham world, I think it's for each foot you go up, is it 6 miles?
6 miles.
Okay, so each foot in elevation gets you 6 miles in distance, assuming that there's no obstacles. Right? So the higher you get that antenna, the more distance you're able to communicate. You can have a 5-watt radio, a low-powered radio, that can communicate over a very long distance if that antenna is up and there's nothing in between. There's a guy on YouTube called Gorilla Comms, and he set up a repeater, which I'll show you, on a mountain. He lives out west, and he's able to get response back from that repeater for 32 miles because it's up high and there's not a lot of obstacles in between that repeater. So what the ham community's done is they've established repeaters all across the United States, and if you have one that your little Baofeng radio can reach, what they'll do is they'll receive your signal and then retransmit that at a higher power rate, and that will extend the range of your communications. One of the things that I would like to do is identify where folks are at, see if we can get you connected to that repeater. If you can hit that repeater, then you have the potential for being able to get in kind of communication with other folks in the group. Another thing about repeaters, and this is something that's well established here in Pennsylvania, is the hams have set up repeaters, and then they connect those repeaters over the internet. And so I'm here in Eastern PA, and I hit this repeater that's networked. That transmission is sent out over the radio waves, and in addition to that, that signal is sent via the internet to a repeater in Western PA. And so if I hit Donnie's network repeater, my broadcast can go as far as Western PA. So there's the potential for us to be able to establish communications using these network repeaters, and that's one of the things that I'm going to look for if you provide me your location, is the repeaters that are in your area, and then we'll see about whether or not you can hit them. Okay, so in getting these radios, one of the things that you find pretty quickly is configuring them is a real pain. There's a menu system, and you've kind of got to drive through that menu system to set it up, set frequencies and squelch levels and all this technology stuff. Fortunately, the tech world has come up with a way to interface your computer with these. And basically what you do is you get an Excel spreadsheet, it looks like an Excel spreadsheet, and you can key in all of your frequencies and then have that automatically load to your radio. It makes configuration much simpler. There's a free package out there called Chirp. The problem with the Chirp package is with all these operating systems, sometimes it's a real pain to get it configured to be able to communicate to the radio. So what I did to make life a little bit easier is there's a company out there called RT Systems, and you can go to rtsystems.com, and they have this long list of radio manufacturers and all of the models of radios that they have available. What you do for around $40 is you buy a software package and a programming cable, and that allows you to easily interface with your radio and get it configured. So what I'll do, I'll show you guys what that looks like.
So if I understand, out of box, the radios basically don't function? They have to be set up? Is that correct?
So when you get your Baofeng radio, it's going to come, it's going to be configured in English, and you just turn it on. It's not like one of these double pack radios that has all the FRS and GMRS channels configured for it. So what you can do is you can turn it on and it'll be in what they call frequency mode, and then you can key in the individual frequency that you want to speak on.
Right.
From there, it gets more complicated. So within a radio, a specific frequency or channel can have communication tones. And what those communication tones do is send out a signal to the receiving radio that tell it to do something. From a security perspective, that can be leveraged by us in that on a given frequency, we can set up security codes so that if it's a popular frequency, if we're using GMRS or FRS, we can set up tones that are part of the radio that will filter out other signals. So if somebody doesn't have the same configuration, they can broadcast on the frequency that you're listening on, but your radio is going to receive it. It's not going to receive the proper tone, and then it's not going to broadcast to you. So from a security perspective, I'll touch on security. One of the things that we can do is take the licensed radio spectrum, GMRS, FRS, and MERS, and make them more secure by coming up with our own special configuration. And in that, the radio receives on one frequency and it broadcasts on another. These are what's called dual band radios. So what that means is that when I turn it on, I set it in the right mode, it'll receive on one frequency and it'll send on another. What we can do is configure the radio such that instead of just sending on a specific frequency, we can set it up so that it sends on a specific frequency but listens on a different frequency. We configure the radio in such a way that the two channels have those swapped. What it does is anyone listening on a particular frequency only gets half the communication. So I communicate to you on this frequency. When you communicate back, you're communicating back on another frequency. Mm-hmm. The person in between that would be trying to intercept that is going to have a much more difficult time trying to figure it out. They would have to scan through all the other frequencies and figure out what frequency you're communicating on.
Got it.
So, and I'll go over some of the security stuff once the computer is booted up. These radios are capable of broadcasting on ham frequencies. You need a ham license to do that. There are also the radio frequencies that I just mentioned, FRS, GMRS, and MERS. MERS is a frequency that we can broadcast on that doesn't require a license. Right? And that keeps us legal. The other thing that you can do is you can go to the FCC website and you can get a GMRS license. It does not require a test. All that's required is you pay $75 and you get a 10-year license to be able to operate on those frequencies. There's multiple channels associated with it. The benefit there is if you sign up and pay the fee, your entire family can use the radios. So it's not just limited to you. When we start looking at some of the VHF and UHF frequencies that require a ham license, then you have to actually go through the process of taking the test and getting registered. To operate during normal times. If there was an emergency, you can get away with actually broadcasting on those frequencies because there's an emergency. There's a gray area. I'm not telling you that you should. I'm not telling you that you shouldn't. These radios have a limited amount of power. They're not going to broadcast all that terribly far. Because they have a limited amount of power, if you're operating within the frequencies that are considered legal, potentially you could use those frequencies and nobody would ever know. And that's up to you. You can decide to take that chance. I'm not telling you to do anything illegal, but it's an option. So I'll go back to how to get these things configured.